Welcome to the Uncle Jim Effect podcast. My name is Dennis DeLoach, and today we're going to get busy. It's episode number 38, and we're going to talk about listening. What's that? Yes, listening. And we call that the forgotten skill. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Again, as you know, our purpose is to create opportunities for millions of people to be able to realize their God given potential. And then in the process of magnifying that with all of their friends, family, neighbors, and serving them, we're going to create a tsunami of hope. And so, a big part of that is the skill of listening. Before we get started again, let's talk about the gratitude I have for you. Please like and subscribe below to our podcast. We're over 30,000 now and growing strong every day. So excited about that. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and we are just excited and growing and couldn't be happier. So hopefully we're creating value for you. I know I'm learning a lot, and let's get started. So today, again, we're going to talk about listening. And the part of this podcast, not part of it, the whole podcast is to develop and understand our God-given potential. And this is one talent that I did not get much in. And I've had to work my whole life to try and create and become a better listener. I am definitely a better listener now today than I was years ago, but I'm not a great listener. And I am obviously striving to do that. And really, that's been one of my big focuses. And I fall short every day. But what we're going to talk about is that people think listening is, in fact, hearing, and it's not. Listening, like I said, is an active, thoughtful process. And we're going to discuss that a lot. So I'm going to start with one of the great communicators of all time, Stephen R. Covey. He talked a lot about listening, communicating, leadership, but we're going to focus today on some of the things he talks about with listening. And he's got a quote that says, "The biggest communication problem is we do not listen to understand, we listen to reply." And I am absolutely guilty of that. So, specifically men, how many of you men, as you're listening to conversations with workers, whether they're male or female, children, your spouse, as you're listening to conversations, excuse me, before they're even halfway through the thought, you've already tried to diagnose and solve the issue. And you're already thinking of a response. And sometimes if you're like me, you'll blurt that out. Well, let's just get right to it. Let's fix it. Let's solve it. Move on to the next one. And that's not listening. That's hearing. And in fact, that leads us to the definition of listening is the active, and that's what we're going to focus on today, is the active process of receiving and responding to spoken and sometimes unspoken messages. So as we're listening, it's an active process. And a lot of times we're not only listening for words, we're watching nonverbal communication to really get a meaning to see if those two are congruent. And so we're going to talk today a lot about how do we become a great listener? What are some of the benefits of becoming a great listener? And then some of the highlights and next level steps that Stephen R. Covey talks about. So some of the ways to become a great listener, and I've searched this out and I've been working on this for years. And so we're going to talk about a lot of those, but there's 10 of them that I've come up with. There's probably a lot more than that. But first and foremost, number one is to practice active listening. Again, active listening is exactly what it says. It's active. Focus. Be patient. Do not think about what you're going to say. Do not think of solutions. Actively tell yourself, what are they saying? Look at them, listen, focus on what they're saying, and try to understand what they're saying instead of jumping light years ahead to what I think I already know what they're talking about. So I've already come up with a solution. So first step in becoming a great listener is to practice active listening. The key there being it's an active process. It's hard. Some people are born great listeners. Most of us aren't. Number two, remove distractions. It seems obvious, but in this age of technology and telephones and noise and all of that, how many people, including you and me, have tried to carry on conversations doing this? Yeah, I hear you. Or checking your watch, checking your phone, checking your iPad. That absolutely sends a screaming message to the person you're interacting with that I don't give a rat's rear about what you're saying. If we cannot today set down the phone for a minute, an hour, a week, we have got some serious problems. And I do think that as we need vacations and rest to get our body and mind away from the stresses of work and family and all of that to rejuvenate, probably more so, we need a technology vacation to shut it off and get away from it. And we can all talk about. We'll hear most of the justification, uh, some of the greatest justification excuses in the world now are centered around this technology issue. It's almost like an alcoholic. Like I can quit anytime I want. If you've ever said that, you're a technology-aholic. And if you say I could absolutely quit, but you're on your phone hours a day, you're a technology-aholic. So remove distractions, put the phone down, take a deep breath, and literally get ready and actively listen. The third step in becoming a great listener is empathy. Show empathy. And part of showing empathy is that, hey, you're more important to me than this, whatever I'm doing on the phone, scrolling, flipping through mind numbing crap that people put on there to just try and get you to do that so they can make some money. So show empathy, put it down, take a deep breath, watch and learn. Another number four number four way of becoming a great listener is avoid interrupting the person. I am absolutely guilty of this. And again, this is something I've tried to focus on. I share with you my weaknesses in an effort to show you that I'm trying to do self-evaluations, and I'm trying to identify and do honest self-assessments on what it is I'm good at and what it is I'm weak at. And what I'm weak at is being a great listener. I've now become an average listener where I used to be a poor listener. And before I die, I hope that someone will say, wow, that guy was a great listener. He actually cared, he listened. And so that's my goal. But avoid interrupting. If you're interrupting people, what that tells them is you're not watching, you're not caring, you're not listening. And they can tell by looking at you sometimes, not sometimes, all the time, if you're paying attention or if you're just in that busy thought process. What's next? What can I say? How can I say it? What can I do? So avoid interrupting. Number 5 on how we become a great listener is to ask clarifying questions. So when there is a natural break, it sounds corny, but it's so absolutely true that as there's a natural interruption or break in them talking, restate what they've just said if you don't understand it. Don't do this just to do it. But if you don't understand the question and they've said something, then ask the question, but restate what they've said and say, I want to make sure I understand this. But did you say ABC? And what that tells them, number one, all of the positives are in effect. Number one, you're focused. You actually heard what they said. Number 2, you actually are listening to what they said. Number 3, you actually are trying to clarify in your mind. It's important enough to you that you're thinking about what they said, but I want to make sure I understand. Those are all such positive things. And that leads into number 6 on becoming a great listener is to paraphrase and summarize what they've said at the end. So when they're done, say, yeah, okay, that's my story. What are your thoughts? How can you help me? At that point, it's good to paraphrase and summarize. And at that point, we're just restating. So what you said is you've got concerns in this area. I understood you to say that these are the 3 things you're worried about in that relationship or the business, A, B, and C. Then that you're really concerned that you have this skill set or the tools to get that accomplished. Is that accurate? And what I've just done is summarize what they've said. They know I've paid attention. And so what I'm about to say now, and they've asked me for that help, is that I've just got tremendous amount of trust with them because I've listened and restated in a good way exactly what they've just said. Number 7 in how we become a great listener is to be patient. This is, again, something I work on a lot. I am not a good listener, and I might be the most impatient person you'd ever meet. But I actively, let me share with you, part of my process of becoming a better listener is to make intense eye contact as they're speaking. And I'm sitting there telling myself, focus on what they're saying. What are they saying? Just be interested, but listen. Try to act like my life depends on what they're saying. And it's almost like I want to memorize and I want to be able to restate to them and I want to understand deep in my bones what it is they're saying. And so be patient. Let that process work itself out. Don't be thinking about interrupting. Even take a deep breath and wait 2 or 3 seconds after they ask a question or after there's a natural break in the conversation. So that was number 7. Number 8 in top ways to become a great listener is to practice mindfulness or to stay present in the moment and focus. Like I just said, being able to take a deep breath, and sometimes that's physically, literally taking a deep breath, which I always think is a great idea, but mentally taking a deep breath and just saying, okay, I've got to focus. What are they saying? I'm trying to stay mindful. When a thought comes in your mind, get rid of it. When a thought comes in your mind, get rid of it and focus and say, okay, what they said was this. And start creating a mental picture in your mind of what they're saying. So what she's saying is this, and I can visualize that issue or problem they're having, and it's keeping me focused. I'm making eye contact because if you start looking off and are thinking deep, they think you're thinking about what you're going to have for lunch. And so really focus on them, but actively keep your mind focused on that. And if it helps you do what I do, which is to create a mental picture, and I'm trying to build a story of what they're telling me from their perspective, not trying to say, well, I can fix that, I can do this, but I'm trying to build the story from their perspective. Creating that mental picture helps me to do that. Number 9 on my top ways to become a great listener is to develop nonverbal communication skills and assessment skills. What does that mean? That means if I'm listening to you speak like this, even though I'm really focused, does it look like I'm all that interested? It doesn't. So nonverbal skills, make eye contact, lean forward, actively listen. Think about how would you listen if someone said, I'm going to say 11 words, and if you repeat them back to me, I'm going to give you $1 million. I mean, your first thought would be, I'm going to focus. Man, everything I got's on it. So I'm not thinking about what I'm having for lunch or do I got to scroll through my social media crap or whatever that is. It is what I am absolutely locked on. That's the kind of mindset we have to have. And so we need to be aware of our own nonverbal communication that we're sending to these people while they are speaking. The more we can make that perfect, and by perfect, I mean eye contact, up, leaning forward, mentally trying to create that picture of just their story, not what you're going to do about it. And that thought that, man, I have got this, my life depends on just digesting what they're saying and being in tune with it and all of those things. If I can do that, wow, we're on our way. And then finally, number 10 on the top ways that I've come up with to become a great listener is to provide constructive feedback. Offer constructive feedback when it is asked for or appropriate. Do so in a supportive and non-judgmental way, right? And so some people just want to talk and talk and talk and talk, and they don't really care what anyone has to say, or they don't want to improve, or they don't want input. They just want to, we call it verbal vomit. They just want to vomit everything out, all their issues, problems, concerns, and then just want to walk away from the scene of the accident. And if that's the case, uh, to be brutally honest, I try to avoid people like that because I'm not doing them good. They don't want me to help them. It's wasting time. And I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to all people, but I'm saying if there are people that want to take a lot of your time and do what we call verbal vomit, just tell you everything and anything and all of that, and do not want any kind of communication, reaction, input, opinion, then I think you're wasting your time. So Those are 10 steps that if you will apply in your life, and I'm trying to do those in mine, I'm trying to 10x my listening skills by every day working on these things. And am I good at it? Absolutely not. I'm better than I was, and I'm not giving up. And every day I actively, on my list of things to work on, it says, today be a great listener. And so I'm better than I was. I'm not near where I'll be. And all I do is get up and get going and get after it every day and try and get a little better. Let's talk about some of the benefits of being a great listener. And these are obvious, but I came up with 10 of those. Number one, do you think it improves the relationships when you become a great listener? Absolutely. So that's the number one thing is relationships increase. People know you value them, people know you care about them, and people know they are important to you. The second one is communication skills are enhanced and communication gets better. Instead of we've all seen that where someone's talking to someone, they're like, no, they're yeah. I see. And at the end, they're like, now what'd you say? Okay, that is not communication, right? So as we're active listeners, as we're becoming better listeners, our communication skills improve. And let me tell you something, you want to better yourself from a position of employment or creating value for people or income, you become a great listener and you become a great communicator, and your income and success and the value you create for other people will skyrocket. Number three, uh, when you're a great listener, you become a lot better at conflict resolution because you're not worried about injecting your opinion. You're not worried about injecting your thought or theory. You listen to the sides and then you can offer solutions, right? But if for example, in politics is the easiest way to have this, when you got someone on the left talking to someone on the right, they say, I believe this, and they say you're an idiot. And then we don't realize that literally sometimes even the most liberal and conservative of people probably only differ in 10 or 20% of their beliefs. Why can't we at least say, look, you and I agree on these 80%? My heavens, let's come together. We all agree that we live in a great country. We want to be safe and we want to, excuse me, we want to raise a family. I want to be able to work hard and I want my success to be dictated on me. I don't want to be put down illegally or immorally by other people. All of those things. Why do we focus on the things we don't agree on, like how that should be done or those things? So we want to be able to avoid conflict or to be able to resolve conflict. Focus on being a great listener because you're not trying to solve the problem. You're trying to understand the person you're listening to. Number five in the ways benefits of being a great listener is obviously personal growth. As I become a great listener, I grow personally because I'm now obtaining wisdom because I listen more than I talk. I now become a valued source of knowledge because I listen more than I talk. And typically, when that happens, generally, when you've gathered all the data before you react, you usually give better recommendations. And also, as I listen more than I talk and prove that I'm a great active listener, people have much more trust. And when you have trust with somebody, you will be a friend, a client, a mentor, or a leader for life. Trust is key. Being a great listener, being involved in their listening is the best way to get trust. Number six, career advancement. We just talked about it. People that are great communicators, people that are great listeners, those people are valued teammates in any organization. Absolutely guaranteed. I've had uh, companies. I've been CEO. I've been owner, entrepreneur of companies that had 50, 60 employees. And that's small by some of the standards for some of you people. I've run multiple uh, businesses in different areas. And let me tell you, when I know someone I can trust, when I know someone that will listen to me, when I know somebody that listens more than they talk. And then I think their process is one of true concern and how do I create value? That person to me is invaluable. And I've got several people in my life that I could go back to that, from an education standpoint, were not qualified on paper to be in the position they were in and making the money they were. But in my organization, I trusted them. They had the process down. They were great listeners. I valued their input, and they rose up the ranks to be some of my highest people. And so it's absolutely true. Number 7 is reduce stress. I mean, all of these things, when you're a great listener, you take the pressure off of you that you don't have to solve these problems. You just have to listen. And if they ask for input, then you can say, I can give my input. But this is something that I had to learn in the beginning is I took it upon myself that I've got to help these people. I got to solve problems. That's my deal. I'm a protector and I've got to do these things. And a lot of times people don't really want to know what my opinion is until I know what their issue is. And I've discussed that issue. And at length, I've made sure that I've clarified what it is in their mind that they're trying to communicate to me. Once I know that and I've communicated that to them, I've reclarified, I've restated it, I've done all of those things, I summarized. And once I've done that accurately, it's almost like they let go and say, yes, you understand. What would you do? What are your thoughts? At that point, that's when you take the deep breath and you've got it won. Give them honest feedback, be constructive, don't attack them, talk about what they've done positive, and just say, this is what I recommend. You've got to be honest, though. You have to do honest assessments with people. Having been a football coach and a coach of people for 30 plus years now, and been involved at high level entrepreneur activities and team sports at high levels, I think one of the greatest attributes people can have is open, honest communication when you're trying to assess performance, results, expectations, job descriptions, goals, all of those things. We cannot worry about hurting people's feelings. You never, ever, ever want to attack anybody personally. And if you ever have something to say to somebody to correct them or that's negative, do that individually behind closed doors. When you have something positive to say to people and you want to sing their praises, you do that everywhere that anybody and everybody can see. That's how you do that. So I think that we can reduce stress by just simply listening. Number 8 is, we talked about it, you increase trust. That's one of the tremendous benefits of being a great listener. People know they can count on you. When they can count on you, everything opens up. You now become a trusted friend, mentor, and advisor. Number 9, this is also one that I think is very important. It's hard to articulate, but I know it's true. When you're a great listener, when you're patient, when you restate back and summarize what they've said, when you think before you speak, when you're patient and listen more than you talk, and when you have good nonverbal skills and they know you're interested, people perceive strength, leadership, wisdom in you, and the respect they have for you skyrockets. That is an absolute fact. People respect and follow those that they think are great listeners. And finally, number 10, on the dentist's top benefits of becoming a great listener, is you really truly, and this might be the most important, you really truly on a deep level get to know people in their soul on an individual basis and what makes them tick. Because a lot of times I think we look at some people and think, oh, I already know what that person's like. They're tough, they're strong on the outside. And you don't realize they're not. Some of the people that I don't even know how to say this. You can't judge a book by its cover. Some of the people that I've truly got to know, the understanding I got of that person's soul and character after getting to know them over a long period of time and personally was almost 180 from what I had thought or perceived just from my quick glance. So don't do that. You really truly get an understanding of people when you will become a great listener. I want to close with Stephen R. Covey. He talks about 4 specific things you can work on in the skill of listening. And these are from different talks he's got, but they're so important. We're going to run through these quick. Each one of these could be an 8-hour day lesson. But first one that he's known for the most is seek first to understand, then to be understood. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. That was one of his 7 habits of highly effective people that sold, I don't know, tens of millions of copies. Almost every business and person has used that in their life at some point. And one of the top 7 for success in any area of life is to seek first to understand, then be understood. That is a listening skill. The importance of listening cannot be overstated. The second thing I liked is he talks about is he calls it empathic listening. He says there's 2 types of listening that goes on. One is there's those of us, and that was me, that listen with the intent to reply. I already know what you're going to say. Let me tell you what I think. Okay. And that does not make people feel good. That it just is not a good way to go. The second way to listen is you either listen with the intent to reply or you listen with the intent to understand. So different. Listen with the intent to understand is the key in life and also the key to listening. Work on that. If you don't remember anything from this podcast, remember, listen to with the intent to understand. And third, diagnose before you prescribe. As a practicing professional dentist for over 35 years, I can tell you that the absolute value in diagnosis is so important. A lot of us jump in and think, well, I already know what this person needs. I already know what their issues are. I already know these things. And that is absolutely true in the medical field, the dental field, and in life in general. And so even though I was a professional and did very, very well and loved my profession, in life sometimes I'll jump ahead of that diagnosis phase and go right into the prescription phase. But in life, to be successful and listening specifically, gather all the data you can before you diagnose. And once you diagnose, they told us in school and all the courses I ever took, diagnosis is the difficult part. Once you diagnose something, the treatment or the prescription is easy, right? But the diagnosis is the critical part. And it's the same with listening. And then finally, with Stephen R. Covey's work on listening, this is something that I thought was very interesting. He talks about and calls it dialogue and survey. That a genuine dialogue between 2 people, meaning active listening, great nonverbal skills, can lead to, if they know I'm doing that, that leads to synergy between people. And this is what I talked about when I found people in business that would do that. Even though they didn't have the degree or the experience, they got stuff done. They connected with me. They were great listeners. They came up with great thoughts. They created value for people. But this generally means that when you have great listening, this is where that concept of 1 + 1 = 3 absolutely comes into play. You want to 10x your business? You want to 10x your personal relationships? You want to 10x your health? You want to 10x anything and everything in your life? Become a great listener. Too many of us, including me, think we know it all. I know everything there is to know about X, whether it's working out. I don't need a personal trainer. I don't need these things. I can do that. Well, all I would do is step back and say, let's look at your results. If your results are phenomenal, please get on YouTube and become a coach in that area, because there's people like us that need that. But if your results are lacking things that people are willing to listen to and to pay money for, become humble and listen, and 1 + 1 = 3. So in listening, I hope you've listened to me this day. I hope you've learned a thing or two. I hope you've increased your skills. I promise you that if you will do these things, this will absolutely lead to such tremendous difference in your life. And this is something you can start as soon as you get off of this podcast. Focus on these things that we talked about. Try that experiment, all these things that we talked about. And I promise you, if you'll do those things, you will become a great listener. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with me today. We will see you soon. And please refer us to your family and friends. Subscribe below. Go look for us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And then, most importantly, go out and discover your God-given potential and get after it. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.